Hey everybody, welcome back. If it's your first time here, I am the Doge that reads tabletop RPG horror stories. Today, I have a tale of a DM that claims to have 10 years of experience in a certain system, only for his claims to seem dubious at best, after the players have to suffer through some of his expertise. But first, this video needs some likes and comments. Lucky, do your thing. Thanks, Lucky. You're great at what you do. Though, with that out of the way, let's hop into this story. And strap in, it's a bit of a long ride. Veteran GM creates the most infuriating campaign ever imagined, and finally crosses the line. By Reddit user ZeroWolf. Welcome to my first ever Pathfinder 1E experience, a campaign that still haunts and frustrates me to this day. It lasted 7 sessions, and I cannot believe that I stayed that long. Years ago, a friend from our dorm found out that I played DnD and invited me to play in a Pathfinder game that his co-worker was putting together. Eager to delve into such an immense and content-rich system, I gladly accepted, provided I could meet with the GM beforehand to get to know the campaign. My grievances will be broken down by topics, as the overarching story and RP were less than memorable and non-existent. Notable cast. This campaign featured 8 players, which was something I had never experienced before, so it was an adjustment for sure. Most of the players were also quite new, with only a few having played before. The relevant players of this story are Billy, the GM, David, my friend, more on his character Abomination later, Anna, GM's cousin, playing some type of spellcaster, Eric, a drow druid, I think, obsessed with birds. Campaign synopsis. Imagine Galarian, but 2,000 years later. When I finally met Billy, that was his campaign pitch. I had asked him to elaborate a bit more, but he gave a cheeky grin and responded, quote, "You'll see. This will become a reoccurring thing." I had to really prod for info to help me understand what to expect for character creation. Are we starting at level 1, RP heavy, combat focused, and adventure path, etc.? Finally, I get him to open up, and he gives me a better introduction. He said, quote, "Understand that I've been playing D&D 3.5e and Pathfinder 1st Edition for over 10 years. I am very good at integrating characters and lore, and making the players feel like they're in a living, breathing world. This is going to be a fresh campaign for fresh characters. It's an RP-heavy campaign with a story focused on character backstories. Everything else you'll just have to wait and see during Session 1. This sounded absolutely fantastic and hit all the right checkboxes for me. But I was curious about one thing. From my experience, I always liked having a Session 0 to get to know the players, set boundaries, brainstorm, and get more campaign lore. So I asked him if he was planning to do a Session 0 instead of just jumping into Session 1. Quote, "A Session 0? He sounded puzzled, but quickly responded, quote, "Oh yeah, I totally plan to do that." Perfect. This sounded like the ideal campaign I've always wanted. Oh, you poor bastard. Character creation. Now, Billy had given a timeline of a week to get him a character sheet and a basic backstory. That wasn't a problem, as I was excited to join the campaign. I jumped to researching the classes and figuring out what I wanted to play, immediately. I knew I wanted to play a class with a pet, and after delving through the plethora of classes, I landed on Summoner. I loved the idea of customizing the Eidolon and watching it evolve and grow as the campaign progressed. I knew little else about it, but when I mentioned it to David, he said, quote, "Summoner? I knew you were a power gamer. That's one of the strongest classes in the game when built right." I just told him that I was interested in a pet class and that I had no intention of power gaming anything. He just gave me that, "Yeah, sure," nod. Regardless, I set about creating my level 1 elven summoner who had an obsession with conjuration magic, and when his ethereal tiger Eidolon manifested, he left his family academy to learn more. Basic, with room to expand when I knew more about the world. We also used a very generous take on stat rolling, 4d6, drop the lowest 2, plus 12. After sending my character info along, I get a quote, "Awesome, thanks." A week went by, along with the requested deadline. Nothing. I checked with David, who tells me that Billy received it and was working on integrating it into the campaign. Okay, cool. About 3 more weeks went by, and still no committal word from Billy. At that point, I was definitely feeling guilty bugging both of them about whether the campaign was still on, and I started to lose hope. Finally, out of the blue, and nearly 2 months later, Billy texted me. He told me that he finally set a date and time, though he never asked about my availability, and session 1 was set for the following Friday. He also said that he had to change some things and that I needed to have a level 10 character, as well as stating that since I chose to go Summoner, I had to take 5 levels of Commoner to offset how strong that class is. So now I had less than a week to put together a level 10 character in a content-heavy system I knew very little about. Now, if you know much about Pathfinder and Summoner, you're probably going, "Oh no," right about now. Most notably, the fact that we will be playing at character level 10, but my Summoner will have an effective class of 5. Therefore, my Eidolon will have level 5 stats. At the time, I was oblivious to how this would impact my gameplay, and so I built the level 10 character as requested. I will also mention that this was a bit overwhelming, because now I had to handle all the feats, spells, and inventory at once. I had no real idea how to equip such a higher level character. David gave me a few pointers, but he never had the time to sit down and walk me through it all, so I winged it the best I could. Session 1. The big day arrived, and we all gathered at Billy's house. This was when I found out that we had 8 players, as I entered the large dining room and saw the long dining table with 9 chairs around it. Upon this table was a long roll of paper with circles and squares drawn on it, meant to be a big city map. After everyone gathered and exchanged player introductions, Billy started to narrate that we had all been summoned to the city from various places, while also placing miniatures around the city map. There were a lot of confused faces, and a lot of people asked if we were actually playing tonight. They had assumed we were doing a session 0 as well. Some even stated that they hadn't finished their character sheets yet, and had hoped to get help during the session 0. Billy gave a long, exasperated sigh and said, quote, "Right, okay, let's help you build characters." He pulled out his phone and sat back. Everyone sat there expectantly, and after a few moments, he realized everyone was waiting on him. Quote, "Oh, David, you know how to fill those out. Can you help them?" David jumped at the opportunity to flex his knowledge. He eagerly ran around helping those that needed help. I had already finished my character sheet, so I sat there talking with one of the other players about our characters and other idle chit-chat. Occasionally, we or another player would ask Billy a question. If it was a campaign or lore question, we'd just get that grin and an, "Oh, you'll see." If it was a system or mechanics question, Billy would think for a moment and then turn to David for the answer. My confidence in Billy's, quote, 10 years of Pathfinder experience was quickly diminishing. After about an hour or so, Billy gets real impatient and just says, quote, "Alright, that's long enough. You at least have skills figured out, right? Okay, let's begin. Place your minis on the map. Anywhere. It doesn't matter where." We all pick out minis for our characters from Billy's stash, and just haphazardly place them on the map. They're spread out everywhere. I thought that maybe he'd given each of us a little introduction based on where we placed our minis, and then we'd introduce our characters. Billy looks at the map, looks around at us, and then says, quote, "Roll for initiative." Well, that caught us by surprise. We all looked very concerned because we were individually spread out across the city, and now we're doing combat. Definitely has my attention. Eric manages to roll the highest initiative, and Billy turns to him and says, quote, "Okay, what do you do?" Keep in mind that we have absolutely zero knowledge about anything at this point. And this is where the issues really begin to shine. Permanent initiative. That initiative we rolled? Yeah, turns out that it wasn't just for combat. Billy told us that since we had such a large group, he needed some way of keeping the chaos to a minimum and making sure everyone got a chance to participate. So we rolled initiative at the start of every session, and during each person's turn, they got to use their actions and movement like a normal combat turn, except for social or exploration activities too. I can imagine how chaotic it is to have 8 players, but this was definitely not the way to handle it. This also completely eliminated the RP opportunities. In the beginning, if someone used their movement to move to another character, they used their action to say something. However, that person could not respond until their turn. This was just so obnoxious. Player 1. Hey, do you know where the tavern is? X turns later. Player 2. Tavern. Yeah, it's over there. I'll show you. X turns later. Player 1. Okay, I'll come with you. You get the idea. Thankfully, after we complained about this, Billy tweaked it. The rework was that you could respond when spoken to, but it was limited to a few sentences. Still, with 8 players, there was a lot of time spent doing nothing while waiting for your turn. Moving through the city was also absolutely obnoxious in this regard as well. The city map was like 30 by 50 squares or something stupid. It was big. The plot thingy is at this building on the corner of the map? Well, it's unfortunate that your mini is at the other end of the map, and you only have 25 movement speed. I'll see you in like 5 rounds. Travel was not hand-waved. This changes later, but not necessarily for the better. So when it came around to some players' turns, they'd just say, quote, I spent my movement and my action going in that direction. End turn. Most riveting. As the campaign devolved, this did get slightly easier for travel. When the entire party was together and we'd collectively say, quote, we're all doing the same thing and moving forward, just to get the quest to progress quicker. However, if someone decided to do anything else, we were back to person-by-person initiative. This meant that people avoided wanting to do anything except follow the quest. If you were curious if we rerolled initiative when combat started, the answer is no. Whatever we rolled at the start was our initiative for the entire session. Perception checks. During that first session, we found out very clearly how much Billy loves perception checks. He loved them so much that if you didn't pass the DC, you were effectively blind and deaf to everything around you. Basically, that perception check was to determine if your character's senses actually functioned for those 6 seconds. The first time I looked at that map and appeared to be standing in the street, I asked Billy, quote, I'm standing in the street, right? Is there anything around me? Billy, perception check. I rolled and get some average number. Billy, you stand in a busy street. Me, anything I should know about the people around me, or should I recognize where I am? Billy, perception check. Dice rolls. Billy, it's just a street with a bunch of people walking around. Me, okay, I'll just head up the street. Billy, perception check. I am so confused at why I was rolling so damn much, but I rolled again. Billy, you head up the street and see that it splits left and right. This went on for everyone, and it wasn't just one session. Every single session was bogged down by mundane perception checks. Those that didn't pass the checks were told they didn't see anything at all. One person managed to enter a tavern and asked what was in it. They failed their perception check and were told that they can't make out anything at all in the tavern. It was such a bizarre experience. However, forcing us to roll so much may have been a ploy for this next wonderful topic. Crit fumbles. Yep, that wonderful 5% chance of something very horrific happening. Nothing caused Billy to cackle more than seeing someone roll a natural 1. I am definitely sure this is the reason that Eric just stopped caring and participating. During session 1, one of Eric's turns, he rolled a natural 1 on a perception check. Billy gleefully smiled and narrated, quote, as you walk through the streets, something shiny just dangles in front of you. As you reach for it, you don't notice the wagon of sharp metal tools and weapons. As it passes by you, one of the sharp tools, a sickle or scythe, is sticking out and slices through your hand, cutting off several fingers. Eric had his brow furrowed in frustration. He asked if he could just heal himself and reattach them. Nope. Billy stated that he didn't take HP damage and there was nothing to heal, so the fingers were just permanently gone. Eric just checked out after that, and I'm not sure why he even continued to attend. For every session from then on, Eric would just polymorph into a raven and fly around. When Billy started adding fly checks, Eric would just find somewhere to perch and pretty much skip his turns, so he didn't have to roll checks. You know what makes me not to want to do anything in your game? Mutilating my character for failing a mundane task. Some other notable crit fumbles were that one character lost a leg when they tried to disarm a trap. In Session 3, my character was blinded in their left eye when they failed a perception check. The final crit fumble is what killed the campaign, and that has its own topic later. We rolled a lot, and there were many nat 1s, but they weren't always debilitating. Billy didn't roll on a fumble table. All the punishments were just based on how he was feeling at the time. I feel like he put far more effort into his crit fumble ideas than the actual campaign. Although, to his credit, Billy wasn't biased against the players. He did apply crit fumbles to enemies as well, which usually resulted in them instantly dying. That bandit that just rolled a nat 1 to swing his sword, he loses his balance and falls on his own sword, piercing his heart. The most anticlimactic boss fight we had was when we arrived at the bottom of a ruined castle and came across a huge beholder-like aberration. On its turn, during the very first round, it shot at us with its beam attacks and rolled a natural 1 on its second attack, which was then described as the creature miscalculating where it was aiming and shooting itself in the face, killing itself instantly. The world and the NPCs. With those topics out of the way, let's discuss how Billy changed Golarion, built a campaign based on our backstories, and how we interacted with NPCs. Billy had mentioned how much of a world crafter he was, and how he integrated his characters' backstories in his worlds. Let's start with how he changed Golarion. What we learned about the new world. Yep, expansive, I know. Getting anything out of Billy about this world was like prying teeth. I grew to fucking hate the phrase, quote, "You'll see, teehee." What's this city called? You'll see. Who's this NPC? You'll see. Why do we need this item? You'll see. What's over there? If you go that way, you'll see. Motherfucker, all I wanted was common knowledge about this world. Is this Golarion or not? How is it that none of us know what city we're in? Is this the material plane? Shadow plane? Is the damn sky blue or rainbow sherbet? Everything about the world was so secretive. It was like trying to have basic character knowledge was revealing the grandest schemes of all time. Okay, fine. We're oblivious to the world we're in. How about backstory integration? My character was the only one to get a backstory mention in the entire campaign. Why? Because I annoyed him about it several times outside of the sessions. I'm the type of player who wants to understand and absorb the lore of the world I'm playing in. I want to know what the GM created and how to engage with that for story and character growth. So, outside of sessions, I pressured Billy for a world lore and hypothesized ideas for my character's backstory in that lore. Finally, at the end of Session 3, and having spent all of this time in the city, Billy tells me that this city is where I grew up. He says that my character went to the academy here. I was a bit annoyed. We spent these last 3 sessions running around this city, accomplishing nothing really, and at no point did my character realize this was their home city. To add insult to injury, the remaining sessions, we would never return to this city. How about the NPCs? Omnipotent or omniscient? Every single one. I may understand it for 1 or 2 of them, as they were apparently gods who had a vital mission for us. What mission? You'll see. Anyways, a few times we actually spoke to certain NPCs, They already knew everything about us, could teleport anywhere, and were all very high-level spellcasters. Even shopkeepers and tavern patrons. Just to try and have a little fun, one character tried to steal from a shop, while another was talking to the owner. Despite a very good roll, the shopkeeper saw and alerted the guards, who arrived in mere seconds. They apologized to the guards and just vanished. Another player started a bar fight. The character probably heard "Omi way" in their head as a bouncer suddenly appeared behind them and clubbed them in the back of the head, rendering them unconscious. Anna, out of boredom and frustration, tried to fireball a crowded street. It was counterspelled by a random nearby gnome. She threatened him and planned to cast another spell at him on her next turn. Before her turn came around, Billy said, quote, "The gnome seems to be powering up in anticipation of your attacks. The ground beneath him cracks from the power he is emitting. Are you sure you want to attack him?" Needless to say, she refrained from attacking him and just walked away. Moving on, how about the story? This mystery quest from the mystery god just disappeared. Starting from Session 4 and onward, we were just teleported around. Session 4, we were no longer in the city. We were teleported to the astral plane because we had to fight an undead horde in this astral labyrinth. No explanation, just we gotta do this now. Session 5, we were teleported to some floating isles and had to track down some ruthless gang. Session 7, you know the water temple from Zelda? It became an incoherent set of one-shots. Exploration was pretty much non-existent. I think Billy realized how annoying it was to be in initiative while exploring, so he just skipped the exploration part altogether. It was like fast traveling in a video game. Just teleport to the quest giver, get the quest, narrate how we get to the location, fight stuff, and then teleport back. Hell, if the session ended before we finished said quest, it was auto-completed by the beginning of the next session, as we found ourselves in a random new place. Favoritism and cheating. Let's talk about David and his character. I would describe David's approach to tabletop RPGs as competitive and hardcore power gaming. His goal was always to find a way to create the most munchkin builds ever, and show it off to the other players, which is why he loved Pathfinder so much, and would generally shit on most other systems. As for the campaign, David seemed to be the only one having fun at the table. He also knew things that we didn't, and always happened to have the MacGuffin or the stuff to get the MacGuffin. Every session, David would have new items or new story-related stuff. I first noticed this during Session 4, when we were trying to find a way through a vault door. David just happened to have the key, because he had stolen it from the chapel. I certainly don't remember us going to any chapel, nor him stealing anything. Maybe they spoke in secret while on break. Anyways, the start of Session 5 was when we confronted them, because as the session started, Billy narrated how David shows up on horseback, accompanied by a legion of 50,000 soldiers. Billy explained that he had been running mini-sessions for David throughout the week. This is news to us. I made an offhand comment about not knowing we could do that, and that it felt very unfair. He says that we could have always done this, and he'd be happy if more people engaged in this manner. Not sure if any of the other players took him up on that offer, but I tried. I felt a bit of a renewed vigor for an otherwise tiresome game. I texted him that night, and over the next few days. No responses. The next session, David has some fancy artifact or something. I asked Billy about the mini-session for myself, and he apologized, stating that he was swamped with work during the week, but he had time for David. Whatever. I tried again over the next week. Nothing. Session 7 arrived, the last session as it turned out, and I was so over this. I felt dejected and ready to wash my hands of this game. Quick side note about the 50,000 soldiers. Due to our collective protest and a bit of hand-wavium, it was decreed that the soldiers were actually automatons, and they all suddenly ran out of batteries. David was a bit annoyed because he had cool plans for that army. To really just hammer it home, We also found around Session 6 that David had been co-writing the quest with Billy. Besides their mini-sessions, they would bounce ideas off each other and implement those into the campaign. David even admitted to knowing the details about our quests, such as where traps were, what monsters were in play, and what treasure we could find. The crazy part was the proud, smug look on his face when he admitted that. He didn't see anything wrong with that. He thought it was cool that he had the insider information so he could pass it along to the party if we got stuck. I may have been okay with it if his character had more of a backseat, follow the party role. But no, his character was the most fucked up, OP, and front and center character. Our first fight, his character decimated everything before we could get into the fight. His character had like 100-foot movement speed, something like 8 attacks for a full round action, and permanent stealth, and more. He gave Billy pause when we were up against a couple Linorms. Billy rolled for an attack with one of them. Billy, does a 41 hit? Something like that. It was a shockingly high number. David, no. Billy looked at him a bit confused. When David goes, he states that he is using his full round action to launch 8 attacks, never rolling below a 35 and dealing something like 200 total damage. To save time and to not have to confirm every attack had hit, Billy told us the Linorms had an AC of 30-ish. All I remember is looking down at my poor Eidolon and realizing that the only way it would hit these creatures is if I rolled a natural 20. Next, Linorm attacks. Billy, does a 50 hit? David, no. Billy, what the fuck is your AC? David, 58. The whole table was silent. One of the more veteran players asked him how he managed that. David responded with, quote, "Oh, you know, I have this certain feat chain that combos with these other feats that gives me a certain bonus, such as allowing me to add my wisdom and charisma modifiers to my AC. I also get class features that enhance that even further." He never really explained the details, even when I pressed him after sessions. In addition, his saves were never below a 30, with a reflex save at one point being in the 50s, I think. I remember watching him roll a will save. The dice hit the tray and landed on a 2. He quickly snatched it up and asked if a 37 saves. A plus 35 will save modifier? Was he cheating? Maybe. I'm pretty sure if given free reign with third-party content and really loose rules, you could totally pull this bullshittery off. To this day, I never figured out how he did it. My guess is that he applied a ton of monster templates to his character and gained a couple GM homebrew benefits. This makes me salty knowing that I had to take 5 levels of Commoner because I had an OP class, but David got to do this. Let's move on to the last, campaign-ending, fucked up topic. Crossing the line. By this point, we were down to 5 players as 3 had some sense to just fucking bail. No one was taking the campaign seriously anymore. It devolved into just hanging out with friends, eating and drinking. Billy had given up making us roll checks most of the time, and the whole mechanical aspect of the game was just gone. Skill checks were just automatic successes at this point. There was still some half-assed sense of quest we had to do, which was a temple far beneath the ocean. However, before we could enter there, we had to take these water-breathing potions. But that wasn't good enough. Billy was pretty wasted at that point, and made the joke that it'd be funnier if instead of water-breathing potions, it was water-breathing suppository pills. Imagine those anti-pressure pills from Futurama. It was really stupid, but kind of a funny idea, albeit treading the line, especially when we had to do this or else our character would sit out, doing nothing. So all of our characters stuck these pills up their asses. Anyways, we just appear in this temple at the bottom of the ocean. It's completely flooded, but we have no trouble walking around like normal. We wander around aimlessly, checking out nondescript tunnels and nondescript rooms, finding a few things here and there, murdering merfolk and jellyfish, and occasionally, we'll roll a skill check. The final straw came when we were going through this tunnel, and it had the typical pitfall gap that descends into pure blackness. Despite it being full of water, we can't just swim over it. We have to jump. The first two rolled and passed just fine. Anna went next, and she rolled a natural 1. Billy exploded in laughter and told us he had the perfect one for this. After a minute of said hysterical laughter, he finally regained some composure and started to narrate. Billy said, quote, Okay, so you go to jump over the hole, and as you jump, something comes up. You see like tentacles, and then this beak comes flying at you. It's like an octopus or squid, and it wraps its tentacles around you and drags you down. I still remember the situation in vivid detail. He was in utter fits of laughter and couldn't really vocalize his thoughts. He was curled up on his chair, and in between the booze and his laughing, his face was a bright ball of red. He had to wipe tears from his eyes because of the laughing, and Anna just gave a confused chuckle. He started going into detail about how the squid thing tore through her clothes, and how it used its tentacles and beak to violate her character's body, all while still having fits of laughter. This was the most uncomfortable moment I have ever had at a table. This was her cousin, mind you. Anna was dead quiet. She was sitting next to me at the corner of the table. I could see her hands gripped tightly together while she trembled slightly. She was obviously very uncomfortable. Slowly, everyone quieted down when they realized how far he was taking it, and Billy made one final joke about turning the game into tentacle hentai. No one was laughing at the quote-unquote joke. Anna glared at him. She stood up and, in a harsh tone, announced that she had to piss and rushed off to the bathroom. This awkwardness and tension in the room was insane. Some of us actually started idle chit-chat, avoiding game-related conversations. Billy was still having the occasional spat of laughter, but he slowly came down, pretty sure he was still too drunk to recognize the situation. After maybe 10 minutes, Anna returned, clearly having been in tears. She tells us that she forgot she had to work early in the morning, grabbed her stuff, and left. Most of us trickled out after that. Later that week, Billy sent me a text saying that he's dropping the Pathfinder campaign, but asked if I'd be down to play Savage Worlds. I simply said, sorry, no. Wow, that whole campaign, for as long as it lasted, sounds like it was a nightmare to play in. From initiative rolls at the beginning of the game that would last all game, and making that number not only be for fighting, but any action you take in the world, to the lack of information on the world and having to roll a perception check for every little thing. It sounds really tedious. And don't get me started on the blatant favoritism, and telling David plot points and dungeon layouts ahead of time. And then, the final cherry on this shit sundae is taking away a player's agency and having her character get hentai'd by a tentacle monster. I in no way blame OP for not going back when that DM asked him to play in a different game. Have you ever had an experience with a player or DM that claimed to be an expert, only to come up short? If so, feel free to share your story in the comments. If you have a story that you would like to be shared in the video, be sure to link it in the comments, post it on the channel subreddit, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you who like and watch these videos, and I hope all of your rolls are natural 20s. Until next time.